He walked into the luxury hotel like a ghost from the past, soaked, silent, and claiming it was once his. Everyone laughed, until the truth stormed in behind him. Watch now. Rain poured down the brick-paved streets of New Orleans, while strong gusts of wind rattled the thick curtains inside the hotel lobby. A layer of warm golden light from a crystal chandelier glowed against a marble floor, where polished leather shoes moved in rhythm. Inside the Marquette Grand Hotel, everything exuded a cold elegance, a place where even breathing seemed regulated by luxury standards. The grand doors suddenly swung open. Wind carried bursts of rain into the lobby. Guests turned in unison. Conversations fell silent. A tall black man, clothes torn, shoes soaked, stood silhouetted in the doorway. His salt and pepper hair was unkempt, a worn-out canvas sack slung over his shoulder, and his eyes, those eyes, shut down every whisper. It wasn't a pleading look, nor one of desperation. It was a gaze of someone with purpose, with pain, and with a history. "Sir, you can't come in here," the receptionist said quickly, her voice tight like a stretched wire. One hand had already pressed the alarm button under the counter. The man didn't stop. He walked straight through the lobby as if every tile underfoot remembered his steps. "I'm here to take back what's mine," he said, his voice rough but resonant. The hotel manager, Richard Langley, appeared from his office, not a wrinkle on his expensive suit, his gaze as cold as steel. "I believe you're mistaken," he said, lips curling slightly. "This is a Marquette Grand, not a shelter for the homeless." "I know this place better than you think," the man replied, standing tall. "This hotel used to be mine. My name is Isaiah Coleman." A burst of laughter erupted from a few nearby guests. Langley laughed the loudest, delighted as if he'd just heard the punchline of the perfect joke. "That's rich. First time I've seen a homeless man show up to claim a hotel." Two security guards appeared, Rick and Tony, moving in on Isaiah at once. They grabbed his arms like he was a threat. Isaiah didn't resist. But before being shoved back through the doors, he turned, eyes locked on Langley. "You can laugh today," he said, his voice cold as steel dropping on stone. "But it won't be for long." The door slammed shut behind him, leaving the lobby stretched in silence, and a chill seeping through the golden light. After the doors closed, the sound of rain pounding against the windows became sharper than ever. The air inside the Marquette Grand felt like it had swallowed a storm. Guests returned to their wine and small talk, but eyes still flicked toward the entrance, as if fearing whatever had come in might return. Moon, the 24-year-old receptionist with neatly tied curls, stood frozen behind the front desk. Her hand trembled slightly as she gathered the scattered papers, eyes lingering on the spot where the man had stood. "Did you see his eyes?" she asked quietly. Higo Torres, the Latino bellhop nearby, looked up from behind the brass luggage cart. "Not the eyes of a madman," he said firmly. "Those were the eyes of someone who once had everything." Moon nodded slowly, then, as if recalling something, bent down to open the drawer where Isaiah had left something during the scuffle. A damp, yellowed scrap of paper, corners frayed, like it had survived decades of wear and weather. Higo stepped closer, glancing around discreetly. "Let me see it." He pulled out his phone and quickly snapped a photo before Moon could stop him. "Are you crazy?" Moon hissed. "If Mr. Langley sees." "He won't," Higo cut in. "And if there's any truth in this, maybe we're all working under a lie." Back in his small apartment in Tremble, Higo sat at the kitchen table under the warm yellow glow of a single lamp, eyes fixed on his phone screen. He zoomed in on the photo, scanning every water-blurred line of text. His heart pounded as he recognized key terms: quitclaim deed, Parish of Orleans, 1976, and finally the name, Isaiah Coleman, listed beside another, Bennett Montrose, founder of the hotel. "No way," Higo whispered. He grabbed his phone and began searching public records. The results loaded slowly, but clearly. The land on which the Marquette Grand now stood had once been combed by two men, and one of them was the man they had just thrown out into the rain. His phone lit up with a message. It was from Moon. "Find anything yet?" Higo hesitated, then typed back. "We might have just kicked the real owner out of the hotel he built." Outside, the rain hadn't let up, but inside Higo's chest, The storm had only just begun. Moon couldn't sleep. All night, the rain tapping against the window of her small Garden District apartment urged her to act. There was something about the man named Isaiah Coleman that she couldn't shake. It wasn't just his eyes. It was a feeling, like a long-buried truth begging to be heard. The next morning, Moon made up an excuse to work overtime and stayed behind after her shift. As guests drifted off to their rooms and staff clocked out one by one, she slipped quietly into the old records room, the dusty vault where pre-digital documents were stored. The cramped space in the basement near the maintenance wing reeked of mildew and aging paper. "This'll definitely get me fired," she muttered. But curiosity had already overwhelmed caution. She opened box after box of files from the 1970s, hands trembling as she flipped through brittle pages. Nearly an hour in, she froze at the sight of a folder labeled Marquette Hotel, Founding Partners 1975. Her heart raced as she scanned the first page. Two names printed in bold, Bennett Montrose and Isaiah Coleman, both listed as co-investors and equal stakeholders. She pulled out her phone, snapped photos of each page, and kept going through later records. But in 1987, something changed. Isaiah's name vanished from all documents. From co-founder, he was suddenly erased from the hotel's history. "No transfer of ownership, no buyout paperwork," she murmured. He just disappeared. Inside a 1988 folder, she found a handwritten memo. Ownership fully consolidated under Bennett Montrose. All former claims resolved. But there were no details on how that resolution came to be. Suddenly, the records room door rattled. Moon jumped, immediately turning off her phone's flashlight and ducking behind a shelf. Footsteps, leather shoes, descended the basement stairs. A tall shadow paused just outside the door, testing the handle. Moon held her breath. If she got caught, she wouldn't just lose her job. She could be charged with unauthorized access to internal files. But the footsteps eventually faded. Maybe a maintenance worker. Maybe not. One certain the coast was clear. Moon slipped out of the room, a USB drive clutched tightly in her hand, filled with the photos she had backed up. A single question echoed louder than ever in her mind. What really happened to Isaiah Coleman in 1987? And who was working this hard to keep it buried? Her apartment was pitch dark, save for the faint blue glow of the laptop screen. The clock on the wall read just past 2 a.m., but Moon's eyes never left the images flickering before her. Each line of text, each number on the aged pages, screamed out like a long silenced voice, demanding to be heard. Inside a thick file labeled Legal Affairs 1985 to 1989, she found a memo from the hotel's former legal counsel. The typewritten letters were faint, but still legible. Proceed with restructuring. Coleman's name to be removed post-incident. Bennett will handle press. Ensure sealed indictment remains confidential. Moon frowned and dragged her mouse cursor to another report. Alleged embezzlement discovered. Evidence includes altered account books, ledgers, and witness testimony. She looked closer, then froze. At the bottom of the page, written in blue ink, all documents created in-house. Bennett approved. Do not distribute. Moon sat in stunned silence. These documents didn't just confirm that Isaiah Coleman was once the co-founder of the Marquette Hotel. They revealed that his partner, Bennett Montrose, had orchestrated fabricated evidence, then used it to send Isaiah to prison. He was framed, she whispered, lips dry. The full picture began to emerge. Bennett wanted full control of the hotel, so he built a case, accusing Isaiah of financial embezzlement. With fake evidence in hand, he easily manipulated the media and convinced the courts. Isaiah, a black man in the 1980s, never stood a chance. Moon reopened the security footage she had secretly backed up the day before. There was the moment Isaiah stood in the rain, defiant eyes fixed on the hotel lobby, while everyone laughed at him inside. You won't be laughing for long. At the time, it sounded like the mad words of a broken man. Now it felt like prophecy. Her phone buzzed, making her jump. A message from Higo. I found more about Coleman's arrest in '87. His lawyer back then was a close friend of Bennett Montrose. This goes deeper than we thought. Moon took a deep breath, her chest tightening. She looked up at the wall in her room. now covered in printed scans and pinned with binder clips like a crime board in a detective movie. At the center, a black and white photo of Isaiah, young, hopeful, standing beside the hotel in 1975. She knew this wasn't just personal curiosity anymore. This was a conspiracy to bury justice, and possibly the only shot to set it right after nearly half a century. That night, Moon was jolted awake by the sound of her phone ringing. On the screen, a message from an unknown number. If you want your friend to stay alive, stop digging. Attached was a blurry photo, flickering ceiling light, a cramped room. In the image, Higo was tied to a chair, duct tape over his mouth, his eyes swollen but still defiant. Moon clutched her phone, heart pounding, tore between terror and a rising storm of fury. They knew she was digging, and now they wanted her silent. But Moon wasn't the type to be silenced. The next morning, she called out of her shift and went alone to the last place Higo had mentioned, a small church on the western outskirts of the city, where he once overheard talk of an old man with eyes you never forget. The priest there fell silent when she mentioned Isaiah Coleman's name. "He still comes in for hot meals every Saturday," he said softly, "but he doesn't speak to anyone. Always carries this old canvas bag, like his whole life's in it." Moon thanked him and set out immediately. She found Isaiah in an alley behind a thrift store, curled beneath layers of cardboard and torn sacks. Under the pale glow of the street lamp, he looked like a ghost haunting the city. But those eyes, they were the same eyes she'd seen that first night inside the Marquette. "Mr. Coleman," Moon called gently. Isaiah looked up and recognized her instantly. No fear, no surprise, just a quiet nod, as if he'd known she would come. "They took my friend," Moon said, her voice trembling. "I need help. I need the truth." He stared at her for a long moment, then slowly opened his worn canvas bag and pulled out an old leather notebook. Its cover faded, corners creased and frayed. 3 decades, he said. "You think I'm still alive by accident? Justice has no expiration date, and I haven't finished writing the final chapter." Moon knelt beside him, heart pounding. She knew, in that moment, the fight had changed course. She was no longer alone. This was no longer about her. It was about a generation whose voices had been stolen, now rising to reclaim what had been taken. And they had a plan. The Marquette Hotel's annual gala, now rebranded as a Montrose Heritage Night, was more lavish than ever. Spotlights lit the grand lobby, red carpets stretched out like highways, and the clink of champagne glasses mingled with the soaring strings of a classical quartet. On stage, Nathan Lee Montrose, only son of Bennett, was moments away from delivering a speech honoring the family legacy. But beneath the velvet and gold, an infiltration was underway. Not to steal, but to dismantle a dynasty built on lies. Moon clutched her small black clutch. Inside it, a mini recorder and an old staff badge, provided by Gloria Whitley, former secretary to Montrose. Isaiah wore a suit Gloria had kept for him all these years, and Higo moved through the crowd disguised as catering staff, his hat pulled low to cover the bruises that hadn't yet healed from the abduction. They slipped down the service hallway, bypassing cameras thanks to an old floor plan Gloria had sketched from memory. The target, Nathan Lee Montrose's private office, where Isaiah believed the original accounting ledgers, proof of every illegal deal, were still kept. But what they didn't know was that Montrose was already waiting. Just as Moon swiped the badge against a lock, a sharp click echoed behind them. The door burst open, and in an instant, 3 men in black suits stormed out. One of them, Nathan Lee Montrose himself. He no longer carried the polished look of a public figure. He looked like a man watching his empire collapse. "I knew you'd come crawling back," he snarled, pulling a pistol from his waistband and aiming it directly at Isaiah. "You thought you'd sneak in, grab some evidence, and vanish like heroes? Not this time. No one's walking away." Higo stepped forward, shielding Isaiah, but Moon, rather than panic, quietly pressed record on the device in her purse. She stepped closer, voice steady. "We know everything, Nathan Lee. The asset seizure, the bribes, the frame-up in 1987. And if you pull that trigger tonight, you won't just leave a body. You'll leave a legacy of guilt broadcast in real time." "Don't tell me what to do," he growled, yanking the recorder from her hand. But he was one step too late. Moon smiled calmly. That was just a backup. The real feed's already been streaming. You just confessed live. A long, terrible pause. Nathan Lee whipped around, his eyes finding the tiny live stream camera hidden inside the ceiling vent, its faint red light blinking. He froze. So did the two guards behind him. And right on cue, the wail of FBI sirens echoed from the front entrance. The glamorous gala unraveled into chaos in seconds. Isaiah looked at Nathan Lee one final time, not with hatred, but with quiet resolve. Guilt can hide for years, but the truth, when it rises, is fire no one can put out. The sound of FBI sirens tore through the evening like a blade. Guests in designer gowns and tailored tuxedos pressed against the walls, confused and panicked, as federal agents poured into the grand lobby of the Marquette Grand. FBI. Nobody move. Moon, Higo, and Isaiah stood in the private conference room just behind the grand lobby. Only minutes ago, the tense battleground between them and Nathan Lee Montrose. Now, as federal agents poured in with weapons drawn and aimed at Nathan Lee, he still hadn't caught his breath. Mr. Nathan Lee Montrose, one agent called out, "You are under arrest for charges of fraud, asset misappropriation, bribery of public officials, and attempted murder." A wave of shock rippled through the crowd. The city's elite, politicians, business owners, journalists, watched as the scene unfolded like something from a crime thriller. "You'll regret this." Nathan Lee roared as the cuffs clicked around his wrists, eyes blazing. "You don't know who I am. My lawyer will be in this room before you make it back to your desks." Moon stood still, clutching the black clutch holding the copy of the accounting ledger. Higo leaned close and muttered, "He's going to hire the best legal team in the country. Might be walking free by tomorrow." Isaiah said nothing. He simply watched as the son of the man who had destroyed his life was escorted out in handcuffs. He knew this was not the end. It was just the beginning. And just as expected, the next morning, the local morning news flashed a breaking headline. Nathan Lee Montrose, CEO of Montrose Enterprises, released on $5 million bail following arrest at last night's gala. Moon threw the remote onto the couch. "We have a confession on tape, recorded video, detailed financial records. Yet he walks out like nothing happened." Isaiah sipped his black coffee, eyes fixed on the screen. "They have money. We have the truth. The question is, who has more patience?" Higo stood at the window, gazing toward the hotel in the distance. "Something's shifting. I can feel it. Reporters are asking questions. People are sharing the live stream. The narrative isn't theirs anymore." Moon turned to Isaiah. "You waited 30 years for justice. Can you wait a little longer?" Isaiah nodded, eyes gleaming like tempered steel. "I'm not going anywhere. This is my home." Just 1 week after that chaotic night at the gala, the waiting room at WCLV News in New Orleans was packed. Reporters, journalists, and even former victims of injustice crowded into the space, all focused on one name that was no longer a mystery: Isaiah Coleman. A short documentary-style video, titled "The Forgotten Man Returns to Reclaim the Truth," had gone viral, reaching millions of viewers in a matter of days. The audio of Nathan Lee's confession and scanned pages from the accounting ledger were published publicly, along with a verified copy of Isaiah's original deed to the land where the Marquette now stood. And the storm grew stronger. Moon, with her laptop practically glued to her, launched a website titled The True Marquette, compiling every document, photo, and witness statement they had uncovered. Higo, still bearing a fading bruise on his temple from the abduction, went from neighborhood to neighborhood, seeking out those who had once been silenced by Montrose's empire. "This man used to be a security guard," Higo said at an outdoor press conference, motioning to an elderly man beside him. "They fired him for questioning racially discriminatory policies. He hasn't been able to find steady work for over 10 years. Isaiah, now dressed in a crisp button-down shirt, no longer the man in the tattered coat, stood among them like a living monument to what the press was now calling justice, late but relentless. "We're not just here to expose a corrupt family," he said into the camera. "We want the entire system to take a hard look at itself." How many others were buried without ever getting a chance to speak? The next morning, The federal courthouse in Louisiana was packed with people from all across the state. The antique wooden benches of the courtroom were nearly filled to capacity. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows onto the bench, where a 72-year-old black man sat upright, his expression calm yet sharp as a blade. Isaiah Coleman. Judge Richardson flipped to the file before her voice clear and firm. After a full review of all submitted evidence, including original land deeds, the secret accounting ledger of Bennett Montrose, and multiple witness statements, this court finds Mr. Isaiah Coleman not guilty of any crimes previously charged against him. All prior convictions are hereby vacated. Furthermore, the Marquette Grand Hotel, built upon land co-owned by Mr. Coleman, will be lawfully returned to his full legal ownership and management. The entire room held its breath at the ruling. She paused, then continued. Additionally, this court orders the Montrose family to compensate Mr. Coleman for defamation and civil damages in the amount of $12 million, as well as issue a public apology. Systemic asset theft and racially motivated dispossession have no place in our justice system. Applause broke out. A few people were moved to tears. Moon gripped Higo's hand, both of them overwhelmed that the long, grueling months had finally led to this moment. Isaiah simply closed his eyes for a second, holding himself back from breaking down. To him, justice wasn't a burst of fireworks. It was a quiet peace he'd been denied for over 3 decades. He stood, not quickly, not triumphantly. He only bowed his head slightly to the judge, then turned to face the courtroom, eyes scanning every face, every promise, every buried pain. On the courthouse steps, the press was swarming, waiting for him to speak. He had no lawyer beside him, no prepared speech. I didn't win today to get rich, Isaiah said slowly, voice hoarse but resonant. I only wanted to give truth a place to stand. I didn't reclaim this hotel for prestige. I reclaimed it for everyone who was ever silenced. Every brick in that building holds memory, and I will rebuild it, not for profit, but to remind the city that justice may come late, but it always comes if you wait long enough. Out in the courthouse plaza, Moon was waiting with a smile she couldn't contain. She threw her arms around Isaiah as he walked out the doors. "You're not walking alone anymore," she whispered. Beside her stood Higo, the bruise at his temple still visible, but his eyes full of resolve. "We've got a hotel to rebuild, right, Mr. Coleman?" That afternoon, the facade of the Marquette Grand changed. The massive portrait of Bennett Montrose was taken down. In its place was a black and white photograph of Isaiah and his late father, standing together on an empty lot, the very ground where the hotel had first been built. Beneath the frame, a polished bronze plaque gleamed with the inscription, "Justice may not arrive early, but it always arrives." Isaiah Coleman. Morning light streamed to the soaring windows of the Marquette Grand's grand lobby, now restored as a symbol of memory and hope. A red carpet stretched from the steps outside to the polished reception desk, where crowds of residents, journalists, and social justice advocates had gathered. They weren't there just to witness the hotel's reopening. They came to hear Isaiah Coleman speak. The 72-year-old man stepped up to the podium. His suit fit perfectly, silver hair neatly combed, and his eyes, still the eyes of someone who had walked through storms, now burned bright like a flame. "I once stood in court, 15 years behind bars because of a lie, then 30 more on streets that never bore my name. But not a single day went by when I stopped believing that truth can be hidden but never killed." The hall fell silent. Young people watched him with eyes wide, as if learning something school had never taught them. I didn't come back for revenge. I came back to open a door, for those who were robbed of their voice, for those raised in a system never built to protect them. Today, that door opens. Below the stage, Moon, now the chief executive officer, and Higo, the new director of human resources, stood proudly. Together, they'd launched new recruitment and training programs specifically for those once failed by the system. People like Isaiah. They restructured every department, implemented training in equity, racial history, and professional ethics. Existing staff could remain if they agreed to participate in the rebuilding. On reopening day, Isaiah stood at the center of the grand lobby, his hand resting gently on the polished front desk. He looked around, No longer a stranger, no longer seen through the eyes of judgment, only respect. "We begin again here," he said, "not just as a hotel, but as a monument to truth." After the ceremony, guests were invited to explore the newly redesigned space, a history library, a photo gallery showcasing early 20th century black entrepreneurs, and even a legal aid center offering free services to those wrongfully convicted. What was once a monument to wealthy white power, the Marquette Grand had become a sanctuary for stolen dreams reclaiming their voice. Etched into the marble wall in the heart of the lobby were the simple words, "Justice doesn't come from silence. It comes from those who refuse to stay down." The story of Isaiah Coleman quickly spread across the United States, becoming a topic in national media, classrooms, and community forums. He never sought the spotlight, but his belief and his patience ignited a generation that understood. Even when denied, truth is a flame that cannot be extinguished. And on that day, as the sun set over Marquette Grand, no one called Isaiah Coleman a homeless man anymore. He was a symbol, a living testament to a simple, enduring truth. Justice may be slow, but always comes.